Hello, everyone. Welcome to CareAcademy's monthly recruitment and retention webinar. This one's brought to you by both CareAcademy and Axxess. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. My name is Ashwin Chaudhramani. I'm a senior marketing manager here at the CareAcademy team. We're joined by both Andrew Mantuano, who is part of the content team, our senior learning development manager here at the CareAcademy team. And we're also joined by Christina Andrews from the Axxess team. We're going to get started just in a few minutes. I see people are joining already. A lot of folks. If you're here and you're excited to be here and you're excited to learn about how to support your caregivers, feel free to use the chat. Feel free to use the Q&A and just say hello. And we're just going to get started right away. So just a couple things before we get started. Just letting you know that this webinar is being recorded. We are going to be sharing out the slide deck and the link to this recording after the event. Give us a little bit of grace in 24 hours before we get that to you. And we'll also be handling questions and answers at the end of the session. So as I mentioned, there is a little button that you see at the bottom that says Q&A. If you go ahead and press that, you are able to pose your questions. We might not get to your question right away, but we'll get to it at the end of the session. So if in between the session you hear something and you have a question that you want to ask, you can feel free to put it on there at any time, but we'll probably get to it at the very end of the session. And I'm going to go about getting started with introductions. So I'm going to get started with Andrew Mantuano, who is our senior manager in the content team. So Andrew manages CareAcademy's learning, design, and development team. He leads a team of content experts in creating engaging, accessible, and impactful solutions that solve real-world challenges in the long-term care domain. He is passionate about combining sound instructional design, appropriate technologies, and storytelling to construct engaging solutions that meet our learners' needs, with the ultimate goal of improving client health outcomes. Welcome to the webinar, Andrew.
Thanks so much, Ashwin. Appreciate it.
And next, I'm just going to introduce our next speaker, who is Christina Andrews. Christina Andrews is a Director of Professional Services at Axxess. Christina Andrews, where she delivers practical operational solutions to help clients scale operations using technologies for home health, home care, hospice, and palliative sectors. Prior to joining Axxess, she was the Senior Manager of Growth Solutions at Symmetry Healthcare Consulting, formerly known as Simeon Healthcare Consultants, LLC. She earned her bachelor's degree in business administration with a concentration in marketing from the University of Toledo in Ohio. So welcome to the webinar, Christina.
Thank you, Ashwin. I'm happy to be here.
And just before we kind of go into the meat of our discussion, just kind of going over a couple of things. I want to introduce you all quickly to CareAcademy. CareAcademy is a premium offering in training, a premium training solution offering for home care, home health agencies. We've till today, we work with over 2,000 active employers. We have over 620 hours of training. And till today, we've trained over 500,000 caregivers within the US. Not only that, but we're also the nation's only college credit healthcare career program. Just a little bit about our platform. We help manage operational performance. We simplify compliance. We have open API integrations, which means we integrate with some leading home care agency software, including Axxess, who is on the call with us today. We have automated text messaging and much, much more. And people use us for a lot of things, but one of the, over the multitude of reasons people use CareAcademy is just that continual ROI, everywhere from the immediate, when it comes to reducing your time of your onboarding, when it comes to making sure that you are getting more completions than you are from online training than any other forms of training, versus ongoing in terms of increasing your caregivers and your staff's knowledge, as well as in the long term, kind of just improving that client satisfaction by having the staff that's able to do the things that they need to do in order to be ready to be getting clients home. And I'm going to hand it over to Christina just to talk about Axxess.
Thank you, Ashwin. So Axxess is a leading technology innovator for the healthcare at home. We provide solutions that help improve care for more than 3 million patients worldwide. And we are also trusted by more than 9,000 organizations. We lean in and we have recognized the pain points for the care at home industry. And so specifically and intentionally, we have hired subject matter experts that have worn many shoes within the care at home industry to enable us to stand up a complete suite of services that are easy to use solutions, empowering the care at home within the home health, home care, hospice, and palliative providers, enabling them to make healthcare in the home human again. This is a beautiful example of how we have intentionally kept in mind our true north. We wake up every single day thinking about the patients and their families and extended families, and wanting to ensure that we empower the care at home providers with a single sign-on solution that enables them to drive competencies, giving them the confidence to provide that bedside care or that care within the home without being a distraction. That is a goal for us, is to ensure that we do not become a barrier between that direct care. So this is an example of our ecosystem, what the providers are able to access through Axxess. And you can see there are multiple connecting anchors here, anywhere from our patient engagement to our ease of use mobile, in addition to business intelligence. When we think about the metrics that matter, and the ability to minimize risk and to lean in and to continue to improve quality, our business intelligence really help organizations scale within all sectors of their organizations, operations, financial, and clinical, as well as quality. As Ashwin had mentioned, we also offer something that I'm sure we'll touch on today, our Axxess certification and training. We felt it was important to have that single source of truth, and enabling and empowering the care at home to learn more about the industry and the why behind the technology, in addition to staffing and scheduling optimization. So that's a little bit about Axxess and who we are and how we've surrounded our ecosystem to align with our true north, our patient and our families. Thank you, Ashwin.
Thank you so much, Christina. So really excited to kind of get to the meat of this discussion. If you've joined late, just to know you're in the right place if you were looking for how to best support your caregivers. Want to kind of just start off with kind of why this is an important topic, and Christina, I'll kind of get started with you.
Yeah, when we think about our aging population, we are anticipating about 98 million individuals at the age of 65 or older in 2060. And that's really just right around the corner. And so how are we going to continue to bridge the caregiving, the staffing scarcity, the staffing allocation or management? How are we going to bridge that gap? And so today we're going to talk a little bit about how we can lean in and not only support the caregivers with whom we have today, but how can we attract individuals to, I like to say, bringing sexy back to the care at home industry again, right? Enabling them to have that gig economy approach and that work-life balance. So yeah, in 2060, 98 million, we have to think a little bit differently and construct the way that we approach our caregiving so we can help support this need in the future.
Thanks, Christina. And I know we have a lot of great questions coming up that we're going to ask, and just thank you for setting the tone. Andrew, I want to ask you if you want to kind of just add a little bit to that.
Sure. So +1 to Christina's sentiments. I think that it's a really valuable conversation to have. I'm happy to be a part of it. Just talking about ways to support a very traditionally under-supported group. And I think that there's a lot of ways that are kind of right under our noses, maybe that's we can leverage, such as training, to better support our caregivers in their work-life balance and their career growth. And to Christina's point about kind of attracting new employees, that's such an important point that I'm looking forward to discussing more, and also discussing how to best invest in the employees that you already have. So we're going to touch on a lot of retention issues or ways to support retention as well. So looking forward to getting started.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. And just so that the audience know, the questions that we're going to ask are questions that Christina and Andrew have seen some of them, but they haven't seen really all of them. And if you want them to see more questions that they've never seen before, use that Q&A button and we'll get to those at the very end. But I'm going to get started with this first question, which I'm going to ask to both Christina and Andrew, starting with Christina, which is, supporting caregivers can feel like a broad topic. There are many ways agencies can do this, but can you give us some 2 or 3 real examples? What are the most impactful ways that you've seen agencies implement support structures?
I love this question because it really pulls at my heartstrings, because really it starts with employee engagement. And I know a lot of us have heard or have been peppered with employee engagement strategies, techniques, and/or concepts, but truly, this is the single and most or best driver of well-being. And there's a lot of social media content surrounding workforce well-being as of late. And so I have a couple of stats that, will also help us to set the tone throughout our conversation today. And for those who have heard me speak before, I love stats. So here's your first one. 1 in 4 US employees feel strongly that their organization cares about their well-being. This is the lowest percent in nearly a decade, 1 in 4. And so when employees feel that their organization care about their well-being, they're much more engaged with what it is that they're doing. And they're 69% less likely to be actively searching for a job. I'm sure many of us today on this call, we have worn those shoes to where we have felt that disengagement, we have thought about, or maybe we have searched actively for another job. And so when we think how our organization leaned in to help support our well-being, what did that look like? And what does it look like today for your organization? Because supporting that well-being is going to help to reduce overall burnout. And that employee themselves will be 5 times more likely to strongly recommend and advocate that your company is the best place to work. I mean, who doesn't want that word of mouth, marketing and sales that you don't have to pay for? I mean, you have the employee itself, but you're not paying for that additional. And so when they also feel that their well-being is being measured and that litmus test is being conducted, they have a sense of trust with their leadership. And we know that when our team members trust leaders, then that aligns with our mission and vision, and it helps us to continue to meet our true north. And they're much more engaged. And so when we think about engagement, the other component that I think is very important is culture. And the pandemic really has enabled organizations to think differently about culture and maybe even redefining their culture. I could think back to the days where I'd walk in an agency and I'd see the mission and vision sitting on the wall, and I didn't feel it. It wasn't palpable. So is the culture within your organization, is it palpable? Not just words on a wall outlining your mission and vision. And so how I like to construct this particular concept is culture is made up of the features, the individualized personas of your team members. And so that's the difference between hiring an ambassador and hiring an employee. When you hire culture, that's your foundation, right? That is the unique aspect or sum of the values, your traditions, your beliefs, the interactions, behaviors, and attitude. When you hire for those specific attributes, you can check mark that culture box as that was easy. But if you hire employees that you have to teach culture to, that makes it much more difficult for your organization to scale, for your organization to meet that 98 million here in 2060, and also to have that recurring would recommend. So I would encourage you to think about, what is the definition of your culture today? Is it truly a mission and vision, or is it specific attributes and behaviors that you're hiring for that gives you that foundation? The other area that I would say is important too is onboarding and training, ongoing training. And I know Andrew is probably shaking his head right now, agreeing with this statement. But recently, Axxess, we conducted a survey with Symmetry, and we asked the care at home industry, tell us a little bit about your onboarding experience and your professional development experience. And 57% of the respondents said they did not get adequate training and support. 57%. So when I think back to the day that I was in industry as an administrator, I was wearing an administrator's hat. I was wearing the educator hat. I was wearing, the recruiting hat, multiple hats. So what did that experience look and feel like for that employee? I'll be honest, I wasn't conducting that litmus test. I wanted to get those individuals in the door and get them out because we had patients to care for. Did we do it well? Yes. Could we have done it better? Most definitely. 55% of those respondents feel that they don't have opportunities for career advancement. And the reason why I think this stat was particularly alarming to me is because in 2025, 75% of our workforce will be made up of millennials. And a key characteristic for their employer of choice is the opportunity to have career advancement. And so how are we infusing our workforce with professional development? And then 46% said, in addition to career advancement, I'm not receiving that professional development through a mentorship program or through that ongoing training and development. 64% of our turnover, it occurs within 3 to 6 months of tenure. So it's a great baseline for each of you on the call today. When you assess your turnover, what does that percentage look like? And what does that percentage look like within that 3 to 6 months? Then last but not least, Ashwin, to round out this particular question, technology. I mean, of course, I have to layer this component in. As I mentioned when I was opening with who Axxess is, it cannot be a barrier. And so what role does technology play within your organization? Is it helping you to bridge the gap to care delivery? Is it helping to improve competencies and confidence for your caregivers? Is it supporting that overall professional development? So what does it look like? So that's a great actionable insight for you to take back and to assess your organizations. Andrew, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Christina. Really excellent points. And I was definitely shaking my head both outwardly and internally when you spoke about training and onboarding, the importance of that and supporting caregivers. And I'm probably going to sound like a broken record. Apologies in advance because a lot of what I'll be speaking to today and in the context of the discussion is about the importance of training and speaking to what Christina mentioned earlier about the importance of providing career growth opportunities for caregivers as a means of supporting them, especially given the awesome statistics that Christina shared around the millennials are going to be the brunt of the workforce very soon. And I'd love a copy of the study if you have it later, Christina. And so I guess I'll start by sharing some broad examples, or rather, I guess, specific examples of supports that I've heard in conversations with customers. So I like to call these pedagogical supports. So they're kind of indirectly related to standing up and maintaining an effective training program, which of course in turn supports your caregivers in their growth. So one large organization that I spoke to did something really cool with their ongoing annual training. So they had groups of training by topic, and they administered this training aligning with specific months or time periods. So rather than just assigning out 12 or 14 hours of training all at once, maybe towards the end of the year, they said, all right, we're going to have all of this heart disease related training in National Heart Month in February, or we're going to have a defensive driving class rolled out in Distracted Driving Awareness Month, which happens to be in April. So everybody keep your eyes on the road. I know I'm guilty of some of the bad practices, but and so how is that beneficial to them? It's great to have things neat and tidy grouped together, but there are also some learning benefits. So rather than just throwing this pile of 14 topics at learners all at once, you're helping them to reduce cognitive load. So reducing distractions or information overload by targeting specific topics and aligning it with, you know, a larger month or something that contextualizes that information. It also makes it more fun. So people like to have, you know, themes and that sort of thing. Another pedagogical support that has come up a lot in conversation, I know Ashwin has heard this from a lot of our customers, is incentive programs. So how can you incentivize caregivers to complete their training? And this could be a financial incentive. It could just be for bragging rights. So for larger organizations, I've heard that's successful rollouts of kind of competitions by units or location, you know, which location has the highest completion of their annual training. And I've seen this work personally in a slightly different context. I used to work at a small liberal arts college where I rolled out a competition based on by class, so the board of classes, the graduate students, staff, faculty, and people just did not want to lose. There was no financial reward, but just tying the incentive to complete it to a larger mission. So in this case, it was security awareness training. So we don't want our school to get hacked. We don't want cyber criminals to take over things. In our context here, tying that incentive to better health outcomes. Our location is going to be better able to serve our clients and lead to those better outcomes than this other location who didn't complete their training at the same percentage. So that's just some really kind of neat and novel ideas that I've heard of. And so more specifically about pedagogy itself. And how caregivers are taught and how they learn the necessary knowledge and skills that they need to perform their jobs. So one way of supporting caregivers is to make sure that the training that they're taking is high quality, that it's engaging and it's relevant to their needs. Also the relevance to their performance context, so whether they work in the home or facility, and also their lifestyle. So how are they going to be completing this training? What time do they complete it? So on what device do they prefer to complete it on? Taking all those things into account. I know there's some folks out there, some agency owners, administrators, staff members who may be tasked with creating your training in-house, and that's a tall order. There's so many other things going on, so many other priorities. It can be difficult to focus on making your training engaging and effective. If you're able to, if you have a little extra budget, I would recommend working with someone who does have some training expertise. There's some great books that I recommend if you want to take a DIY approach and create your own training. If you're choosing a training provider, I'd recommend that you choose one that does follow sound instructional design practices, that really targets or focuses on the specific needs of our target learners, our caregivers. And lastly, I don't want to blather too much on this topic. I could talk all day, but so providing additional training opportunities, and this kind of goes with the upskilling path that's Christina mentioned. So I really light up when agency administrators, owners, or other folks talk about how they want to offer more education opportunities for their caregivers outside of just maybe what's required. And I think it's one of the best ways to provide these career pathways to support employees, make them feel appreciated and valued, kind of building again that culture, like Christina mentioned, of all right, we're a learning company, we're a learning agency, we're building in the value of progressing in our jobs and also in our future career growth. So yeah, that can be one way to really encourage loyalty and retention for your agency. And I'll stop there so we can get to other questions.
Andrew, I wanted to layer in one additional component, and you may have mentioned this, but something that we also focus on is the micro-learning component for individuals. I don't know about y'all, but sometimes my attention span, it may be a little less than a goldfish. I think right now it's like 9.12 seconds for a goldfish, and I think the human study was 9.6 seconds. So that micro learning really enables an individual to be engaged, and it helps with the learning transfer of the content because they're not having to think, well, I'm only going to remember 30% of what I just read or what I just did, or if it's more of a gaming technique. So that's been a huge component to help with that overall learning transfer. So
Yeah,
thinking about that, the other thing too is the mobile device. I know I do a lot of my reading. I do a lot of my own training, with my little tiny cell phone, which is the size of my hand. So I can only imagine that is the same, or that could be true for most of our caregiving population, that they're utilizing a cell phone instead of maybe an iPad or a laptop.
Absolutely, right. They can be on the go. Maybe they want to complete their training while they have a break on their shifts. Maybe they're on public transit and they can complete a microlearning video then. And further hammering home on microlearning, it can be a huge deterrent if you look at a training module and it's 60 minutes long. Like, I don't have time for this right now. If it's, chunked in 3 to 5 minutes, all right, I can tackle this while I'm, making my oatmeal or something. So yeah, +1 to all that, Christina.
High five.
Y'all deserve those high fives. And I'm gonna kind of proceed with another question for Christina. So Christina, I know you mentioned a little bit about hiring for culture. And to that, I'm just gonna ask, are there any common mistakes that you've seen home care administrators and home health agencies make when setting up support structures for care staff that you could speak to?
Yeah, I think the first one that came to mind is ensuring that we are working our caregivers to the top of their license, their certification, and or their skill set. As I mentioned, me wearing multiple hats, I'm a type of person that likes a lot of change. But as we know, not a huge portion of our population likes a lot of change. So ensuring that they're working to the top of their license, their certification, or their skill set is going to enable them to be much more fulfilled at work and engaged at work. I know Andrew and I talked about, that career and professional development. We really want to think about the millennial population and how we're connecting them to that career pathing. And so what does that look like today for your organization? And what needs to be true as we lean into the years to come? Because our team members, they are our greatest assets, and we have to invest in them. We know that there are multiple providers just right down the roads from where our organizations sit. And so if they're not engaged, if they don't feel confident about what it is that they're doing on a daily basis, that's going to affect their behavior and it's going to affect their attitude. And they'll just go right down the street and knock on the next provider's door and ask for an opportunity. Because right now we are in a candidate-driven market. It's no longer an employee-driven market. And so we also have to think about how we're including them as a valued member. And when I think back to my home health days, the skilled component of the service line, involving the caregivers, our home health aides, our certified nursing assistants as part of the disciplinary team, that was huge for them, huge. To be sitting at that table, while having that interdisciplinary conversation about the patient, because they are the front line. They have a lot of insight to offer of what's going on with that patient and that extended family. So I would say, to consider how you're including them as a valuable member, and don't underestimate the potential churn of the non-squeaky wheel. And so what I mean by that is, for those individuals who always say, yes, I can take on one more client. Yes, I can take on one more patient. Yes, I can go ahead and wear multiple hats. Those often are the ones who will burn out much quicker. So take an opportunity to have a conversation with those non-squeaky wheel team members. And another area too that I have found, just within the recent last maybe year and a half, 2 years, is to think about, we have 5 generations that are working alongside of each other right now. And so how are we helping to connect those 5 generations to understand, those personas and how those personas could help to lift up one of the generations or help to give back to another generation. And I'm not going to get too much on this soapbox, but when we think about our traditionalists and our baby boomers and our Gen X and our millennials and our Gen Zs, they have very different personas, within the workforce. So one size does not fit all, right, when it comes to your organization. And so we can't hire for one type of caregiver. So if you think about your Hello campaign, which I like to call a digital engagement, what does that LinkedIn strategy look like? What does that Indeed strategy look like that is actually attracting someone from each of those generations? So when we think about those who have retired, they typically like community involvement. They also connect differently to clients based upon experience, because their day-to-day routine differs from my routine, from your routine. So have you developed a strategy to attract individuals who are retired? And that's a huge population, right? 65 and older. Empty nesters, for those whose children are now grown and married, children, whatever their lives look like. I mean, those empty nesters are seeking community connections. So what does your recruitment look like as it relates to that? Another thing to consider when you look at younger adults, between the age of 18, 24, they really care about that work-life balance. So they don't want the job to get in the way of their life. And so how does your organization talk about the gig economy or how they can attract individuals to more of a gig economy of being able to be the CEO of when they work and how often they work, whether that's a full-time employee or a part-time employee. And then you also have those individuals who are just career caregivers, right? So, this is their passion. This is what they love to do. It is their connecting anchor, the blood that runs through their veins. So I would just say, don't make the mistake of only hiring for one type. Really think about what your community looks like and sounds like and how you are attracting multiple different type of caregivers. And then last but not least, once you've figured that strategy out, follow up, follow up, follow up, follow up. How many of you have applied to something on Indeed and LinkedIn? It's like 2 minutes. It's 2 minutes with a couple of clicks of a button. And so if a caregiver has applied through those 2 fashions, if you're utilizing either component, most likely they have also applied for 10 other positions, right? So I would say implement the 24-hour rule. Follow up within 24 hours with each candidate. And when you get them in the door, make the decision immediately. Make the decision if they are your culture, if they are your ambassador, if they're going to help you to scale, then hire them immediately, because they're going to walk out the door and go down the street to the next application that they applied for. So those will be some of the common areas that I would say don't underestimate and keep an eye on.
Thanks, Christina. Those examples are really helpful. I think one thing that you pointed out to was the issue of burnout within our staff. So we actually do have a question about that, which is one of the common issues that we hear from caregivers is burnout. What can employers do to help caregivers address burnout? And I think examples like you guys have been providing are really helpful to the audience that's listening. And I feel like, Andrew, maybe we can get started with you and then we can hand it over to Christina.
Sure. Thanks, Ashwin. It really is an important question. And I think it's very basic, but I think a good starting place for anyone is really just to be able to yourself identify what burnout is, identify and recognize it as as an owner, administrator, a supervisor and staff member, even as a caregiver. Really important to know when you're experiencing it or to recognize the telltale signs. And there are lots of different signs, right? So there's the physical aspect of it. There's the mental health signs. There's the emotional signs, and they can all develop and manifest in different ways. And they're not always physically observable. So this goes to one of Christina's points earlier, is that, sometimes the best way to discover this is just to have conversations with your caregivers, and proactively work towards identifying and preventing burnout. Just ask them how they're doing. Maybe they're not, to Christina's point, maybe they're not a squeaky wheel. Maybe they're not going to speak up about struggling, and they might not want to be seen as someone who's unable to meet the demands of this very high stress job, when in reality no one could really possibly meet the demands of some of their work and life situations. So again, to the point of culture, creating an environment where it's okay to have these conversations, it's accepted, it's encouraged, people feel empowered to speak up and be honest about their situations, can really help to prevent and recognize burnouts. And of course, I'm going to take a training angle here. So these conversations can also uncover the need for additional training. And this could be training that specifically focuses on burnouts. So how to recognize, prevent, identify burnout. But it also might uncover other kind of stress factors that might lead to burnout, such as not knowing how to do your job to its fullest, not feeling like you have the necessary skills and competencies to do your job. So I don't no one likes to show up to their job and not feel confidence, especially in such a high stakes environment where your ability to do your job has real, palpable impacts on your clients, the person you're caring for. So talking with your caregivers to uncover any of these additional knowledge and skill gaps, ask them, do they need any more educational supports? What training would be helpful? What topics do they feel like they're lacking right now? And I think just a quick anecdote. So last fall, I reached out and talked to a few of our customers who had requested basic cooking skills contents. And for me, this resonated because I get really stressed out when I have to cook for others, friends and family. I just what am I gonna make? I'm not good. But so there's this level of there's a lack of confidence, there's a lack of skills, and I can imagine how just that feeling can exacerbate an already super high stress situation for caregivers. So doing something small, like asking them, hey, what do you want to learn? What do you feel like will help you be better prepared to do your job well? I think can make a really big impact. And just a quick plug, we did create that basic cooking skills class, is available now. I learned a lot in the process as well, so I'm a little bit more confident now myself. And lastly, Ashwin, I saw a very timely article this morning in my inbox by McKnight Senior Living that focused on the importance of mental health programming in the workplace, again going back to culture. So there's a really helpful guide. It's actually, I think it's called a playbook, so a mental health programming playbook that I'll share the link for in the chat. But I think if it's something that you're considering in terms of incorporating mental health programming into your agency, it's a really good starting place. And I'll stop there.
That was amazing. I think there's already a couple of asks of some of the resources you've mentioned, Andrew. So please put those in the chat. And I was gonna hand over that question to Christina now.
Yeah, no, I love that you spoke about that playbook, because when we think about that, that really helps organizations lean into the overall well-being, and also having that safe place to be able to talk about their well-being. And so one of the actionable insights, that I've used for many years is employee pulse surveys, so especially from a third party. So when we think about the overall employee experience, that does start with recruiting, through onboarding, through their entire tenure, and even when they leave us. So what does that pulse survey look like for your organization? And are you doing it regularly? Are you doing it once a year? Maybe you need to consider doing it twice a year. And so, assessing again, every aspect of the employee's journey is going to be crucial. And then once you do receive that feedback, take time to do a deep dive. I was speaking with a chief operating officer the other day, and one of the things that they found within their survey was nights and weekends. And so that particular pain point was creating that burnout for their organization. And so peeling back that onion, peeling back that layer, they were able to really get to the root cause of, it's not just about nights and weekends, but there was a lot of other components that supported the burnout that came alongside of that. So when we think about the definition of burnout, the World Health Organization defines it as a syndrome that's conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed by the organization. And so although I do feel that employee engagement needs to be owned by the employee, there's also that managerial and that organization's responsibility to conduct that litmus test and to conduct those pulse surveys to identify how is your well-being, what can we do differently? We are listening to you because you are our greatest assets. And organizations who focus on designing and assessing their employee experience program, systematically you can reduce and target burnout for your individual. So that speaks to retaining those that you already have and creating a culture for those who want to connect to a new why or want to connect to your organization. They're going to also feel heard immediately because you've taken the time to listen.
So now we have a couple of questions left and about 20 minutes left in this discussion. We're going to get into questions later. If you have any questions for either Christina or Andrews, please use the Q&A feature. We're going to get to those very shortly. Till then, I'm going to kind of move on to the next question, which is a question for Andrew, which is, can you discuss some ways in which training and upskilling your caregivers support your caregivers?
Oh, can I? Thanks, Ashley.
Oh, can you? Cool.
So I guess adding on to what I've kind of already been speaking to, we know that caregivers have very complex and demanding jobs, and not only physically demanding, but very mentally and emotionally demanding. And they need the proper training to effectively handle all of those responsibilities. And I came across a kind of a sad but humorous anecdote. It was a blog post from the University of Pennsylvania featuring Carol Raphael. And the blog post featured a caregiver that said, I received 19 minutes of training to cook French fries at Burger King. In my state, it only took me 7 minutes to obtain a personal care aid certificate. So I can't imagine that that caregiver felt very prepared to effectively care for a client after those 7 minutes of training. They might have felt prepared to prepare French fries for them, but certainly not perform the other IADLs, ADLs, and other core care tasks that they're responsible for. And I think focusing on providing a comprehensive training program can set caregivers up for success to perform their immediate job duties, but also help prepare them for what's next and for other opportunities that they may be interested in within the healthcare field. So I know, Christina, you love stats, and I'm excited to bring some of my stats of my own into the conversation. So back in 2021, CareAcademy, we performed a research study called the Caregiver Educational Aspirations Survey. And this survey aimed to really dig into the question of what do caregivers want for their careers? What do they want in terms of education? Do they want to pursue other education opportunities? Resounding yes, we found. So out of those 1,500 respondents from very diverse backgrounds and demographics, 70% express interest in pursuing additional educational opportunities. And just to kind of dig in a little bit, 24% said those they indicated that they'd be interested in becoming a nurse, either an RN or LPN. 16% indicated that they would like to gain licensure as a CNA, 16% mentions, just broad kind of healthcare administration. So varied interests, but overall trend, they want to pursue other educational opportunities. So we know that caregivers want to grow professionally, and providing educational opportunities and exposure to the possibilities in the industry can support the caregivers in their career journey and the pursuit of better opportunities. And kind of lastly, to round off this question, I wanted to mention just the importance of this movement to professionalize the role of caregiving. So providing comprehensive competency-based training for caregivers is not only beneficial to caregivers and their clients from an outcomes perspective, but it also helps to further professionalize the role of direct care worker. So caregivers are skilled and they deserve the proper training and the recognition that other skilled professionals receive. And agencies can really support this, support caregivers in their career growth by providing them with specialized training for those specific care needs. And this might include dementia and Alzheimer's disease training, or end-of-life care training, and other chronic disease training. So these skills are, they're not akin to like cooking French fries or delivering newspapers. This is a very professional skill set that they have and that they're learning. So, specialized certification, specialized training can help caregivers to also signal to their clients and their clients' families that, like, hey, I received this training. I'm well prepared to offer this high level of care, which can also in turn help you as an agency owner or administrator to market your caregivers as the professionals that they are, the well-prepared, well-trained professionals that they are.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm going to move on to the next question. I think we both of y'all kind of hit on this a little bit as well, which is kind of that recruitment and retention aspect of supporting your caregivers. We spoke about culture, we spoke about the professionalism around it, but what a lot of agencies are kind of wondering, and I'll address this question to you, Christina, first, which is, how do you hire for culture while at the same time, a lot of the agencies here are like, I'll just take anybody right now. Like it's a hard market. I could use anyone and anyone to kind of come in the door. But kind of the essence of the question is, how can agencies kind of publicize the efforts that they're doing and that they're already doing to support their caregivers as well?
Because I love this question. So first, I would say, check out your application. Do the ghost application process. Read it. Is it all about the skills that you're wanting to acquire, that you're looking for, or are you layering in the characteristics of your ambassador? And so what I mean by that is, and I think I mentioned this in the last question, is that there's an ownership of engagement from the employee, her or himself. And so I have been with 3 organizations my whole entire career, 3. And every opportunity that I sought out, I was looking for a connecting component. How is that organization speaking to me as it relates to culture? How is it going to infuse me and energize me to do what I love to do every single day? And I didn't know this until some time later, but I was actually tuning into the employee engagement equation. So this is an amazing book to read. It's by Timothy Clark, The Employee Engagement Mindset. And what this does is it helps leaders to think differently about the connections that will enable a high return for our ambassadors, a high return on investment for our ambassadors. And so there are 4 primary connecting anchors. And when we think about the healthcare industry, this actually fits brilliantly. First is the social aspect. So how are you peppering in to your recruiting efforts? What does relationships look like? What is that going to look like for an individual? Are they going to be able to be involved in a community, internal and externally? So what does the social environment look like? Intellectual. And Andrew, I love how you talked about that this specificity of skill set within Alzheimer's or dementia. So that type of specificity. And so those who are looking to advance professionally, what does the rigor of work look like? And how are you peppering into your recruiting package? I'm investing in you, and I'm going to teach you how to care for this type of patient or this type of patient or this type of diagnoses at hello. Not once you have them on board, but at hello. How are you differentiating your LinkedIn or your Indeed application from those down the street? And then environmental and culture. That's the third primary connecting anchor. And so we've talked a lot about culture. One of the things that we have done at Axxess is we have an assessment. Say that 5 times real fast, assessment. And so within there, we have peppered in key characteristics such as hustle, hunger, self-starter, change agent, disruptor. So we have thought about those individualized characteristics that we want to interview around, because that's the foundation of who we are. So leading back into what I had mentioned earlier, make sure you have those key characteristics written down and you're socializing at hello and also asking questions around that, because it will enable you to hire for culture and not just skill set, because we know we can teach skill set. Andrew definitely can, but we cannot teach culture. And then last but not least, inspirational. And so when I think about inspirational, for me, it's the difference that I make every single day. And many of us, I'm sure today, can say that we've had a loved one who has received care from a caregiver, whether that's private duty, whether that's home health, hospice, and or palliative. We've had an experience that's really, awakened us to what it could be in the future and how we can continue to advocate for that human touch. So how are you infusing that application process with how they will make a difference to our aging population and helping us bridge the gap to keep our loved ones safe within the comfort of their own home? So digital engagement, ghost application, peppering in your culture to differentiate you at hello would be my recommendation, Ashwin.
Thanks, Christina. And Andrew, I'll give you the floor to kind of take it away.
Oh yeah, I was just +1 the leading with the idea of leading. Hey, we will train you for this specific skill, for this to be able to care for this specific population. I think that's brilliant. And it goes along with another statistic that I wanted to share, that again, out of those 1,500 folks that we surveyed, the caregivers, 85% of the respondents indicated that they'd be more likely to stay with an agency that offered support in ongoing education opportunities. 94% of caregivers mentioned that access to further education opportunities was a consideration in accepting a job offer. So I just imagine, seeing a billboard that says, hey, we will train you to be, have this role with these skills for this population, and that being, kind of a light bulb in my head, like, oh, that's exactly that speaks to me. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to +1 and comment on that. Just a quick plug that I know that I've seen a question about the balance, how to balance offering educational opportunities, making them accessible and available to caregivers, while also combating the kind of workforce shortage and the constraints that caregivers face, and agency owners and administrators face. It's a big question. I don't think that we'll unpack all of it today, but really, if there are suggestions or ideas that you all have as attendees, I'd love to hear them. I just want to throw out that CareAcademy does have a partnership with Southern New Hampshire University, where caregivers can earn college credits for completing CareAcademy classes. And there's a large proportion of caregivers that do have some college credits. They just may not have had the time or the resources to finish and earn their associates or their bachelor's. So offering this as a benefit, as a pathway to for caregivers to complete that education, to get to that next level, again, could be a very enticing way to attract more talents, and the kind of folks that you want in your organization. Again, to Christina's culture point, bringing the folks who represent that culture that you want to attract and to build around. Yeah.
Lovely. And Andrew brought up a great point. At the end of the day, I think at the peak of this webinar, we had about 100 or so participants, or still about 90 something. If there are ways that you're currently supporting your caregivers that we haven't mentioned, please use the chat and tell us. Not just for us, but I think it will be really helpful for your peers that are in this session with you. So again, if there's any way that you're supporting your caregivers that you feel like is a good insight, please share it in the chat. I'm going to open the floor for Q&A, and we had a couple other questions, but I want to make sure that we get to the ones from our audience. So there was one question here from an anonymous attendee. And this question was, how do you balance employees attending additional opportunities for professional development when staffing shortage creates a barrier to attending being granted time outside of the field to attend? So Andrew, I think maybe we can get started with this question, and Christina, I'll hand it over to you afterwards.
Okay.
Super.
Yeah, I think it is a really great question. It's the big one that, again, it's a lot to bite off and chew on. I will say that I think the motion towards, again, microlearning. So learning that's in a format that lends itself to these constraints that we face around lack of time, lack of staffing, lack of other resources, where you don't have to dedicate, entire afternoon to bring folks in-house for a 2-hour PowerPoint presentation. They might be able to complete or work towards completing a training in their own time when they have 5 or 10 minutes. So it's not a solution that's going to solve this very, very broad, larger question of how do we make these really important educational opportunities available and accessible to caregivers, but it's something that we can do now with the tools that we have available to us.
And layering in alongside of the training component, Axxess was very intentional when we thought about our individualized service lines. So not only does our training and certification train on the competence, the why behind technology and documenting the care, it also trains on the actual home health, home care, hospice, palliative component of our industry. So we're intentionally standing up the competencies as it relates to that service line and the specificity that Andrew had mentioned earlier of specific disease processes, and then how we tie that into the technology that they would be using alongside of the bed. And so making that micro-learning become more of I'm on the subway, I'm sitting outside of Chick-fil-A. I mean, who doesn't like a Chick-fil-A now and then? Not on Sundays, but I can take a 5-minute micro-learning to learn more about what it is I do on a daily basis. And that helps to attract individuals to your organization, because at Hello, you can tell them that you have a training platform, through CareAcademy. If you're utilizing Axxess solutions, you have a training on board that's going to help to streamline your operations. It's going to impact the employee engagement. It's going to improve patient outcomes because they're much more competent about the care delivery. And it's also going to enable them to ensure compliance. So Andrew's talked a couple of times about the CE component, and that also is something that Axxess offers through our training and certification, is the ability to earn CEs. So again, you're able to say, I'm investing in you at Hello. Come and help us solve for this workforce scarcity. And one other component, Ashwin and Andrew, that I'd like to layer in, is how are we positioning technology to become more of a gig economy? And so when we assess the care at home industry, currently most are saying we can accept 30 to 50% of our referrals due to staffing scarcity, staffing allocation. And so on our Axxess slide at the beginning of the conversation there, we had something that talked about staffing optimization. And that's something that we have built called Axxess Care. And so the Axxess Care, you can think of it like an Uber, to where your organization can post a visit through this application, and individuals can also upload their credentials, their skill sets, so you can assess who that caregiver is. You make the match and you can say yes to providing that care. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but we are becoming much more agile. CareAcademy, the technology world, of how we are positioning training and certification, and how we are positioning ourselves in more of a gig economy, because we see that staffing scarcity. We're not going to be able to solve it completely, but we can be agile on what we utilize to help us bridge that gap, whether that's through technology and or training and certification. And I feel like we're at the top of the hour, so I will end on that note, Ashwin and Andrew.
Thank you so much, Christina. And yes, we are at the top of the hour. Thank you so much for staying with us. Someone did tell me at the very end that our chat functionality was disabled. So if you want to join me in giving a huge thank you to both Christina and Andrew, you can do that using the Q&A feature. But thank you so much for joining us on this Tuesday afternoon. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and hope to see you at the next webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Thanks all.